It's a continuation.
It's a continuation, thank you, Jim.
Mhm.
So I'd like to call this continuation meeting of Monday, December 19th at 7:30 PM under the Woodbridge Zoning Board of Appeals. And we have our hearing. I think you go ahead.
I go? Okay.
Please, Mr. Martin.
I think you were all here in October when we came for the garage and the addition to the house. The addition to the house was approved, the garage was turned down. Our sense at that point was that there was some sympathy in general for the concept of the garage, but that there was a desire that we revisit the plan and try to sharpen our pencils and move it away from the property line. And also, I think there wasn't a lot of attention at that meeting, perhaps to the garage. The concentration was probably more on the addition than the garage. So we did that, and I want to talk for a couple of minutes about what we did and why we did it and why we couldn't really do much more. I mean, the main thing is that we moved it, so instead of a 3 foot from the property line, it's now a little over 8 feet from the property line. And if you look at the plan, as before, it isn't really the whole garage that's 8 feet, it's one corner that's 8 feet. The back of the garage is by the time you get to the middle of the garage, it's actually more than 15 feet back. So, but last time it was 3 feet and now it's 8 feet. So what we did was a couple of things, which I included a little cover letter here, but I'll go through it real quick. One thing is we reduced the size of the garage from 24 feet 6 inches to 22 feet 6 inches. As you know, it includes the overhang. So this leads to an interior size of 21 feet, which is actually less than what's recommended by most of the experts for a 2-car garage. They actually prefer more like, the 23 feet. Actually, a lot of them suggest more than that, but 21 feet is pretty much as small as you can go and still have a 2-car garage that works. We moved the driveway a little bit so that the driveway now runs 4 feet from the house in a straight line from the addition. We felt that 4 feet was really kind of the minimum in order to be able to have some plantings along the driveway. The driveway is actually lower by about 1.5 or 2 feet from the level of the house, so there's got to be a wall there. So it leaves about 3 feet to be able to put in some kind of shrubbery so that you're not, feeling like you're driving like right along the edge of the house. And the third thing was the garage, was sort of designed to minimize its visual effect. It has a very low roof that's in the front. It's a 1-story garage with a roof that's designed to be sort of minimally invasive, but because it had an overhang in the front, it was pretty easy to actually chop the overhang so that instead of the overhang extending over the whole side of the building, it actually now is at an angle which is parallel to the property line, which actually moved it back by, a foot or 1.5 feet without really affecting the visuals very much. And it was something that our architect suggested as an attempt to move it back a little bit more. The other, I think, issue that we felt we could clarify, so those are the 3 things we did. It's a little difficult to see what else we could do given the location of the septic system. We're as far back against the septic system as we can be. As I said, I don't think I can move it closer to the house. You really need to have the driveway pretty much leading straight into the garage. It's not a good idea to have a turn right at the end of the driveway. You gotta be able to back in or pull in straight, or else you're likely to get yourself into trouble. And the size is, there's sort of nothing much that can be done with the size to make it any smaller and still be, a 2-car garage. I know that some of you have looked at the property and sort of understand this, but I'm not sure everybody has. So the neighbor had no objections, and I wanted to give people a feel, so I enclosed a couple of pictures. As we mentioned before, actually until this survey, the surveys always showed the stone wall as being the property line, but it turned out in this survey, it got moved over somewhere between, probably depending on where on the stone wall you are, it's like 5 feet from the beginning of the stone wall, or as much as probably 10 feet from the other side of the stone wall. And the neighbors always considered that to be the line. We have too. We've actually taken care of trees along that line. But from a visual perspective, we took a couple of pictures. Her house is, the full 115 feet back from the road. So it's actually, we measured, it's about 90 feet, 5 feet behind the part that moves onto her property by 8 feet. So it's not like her house and then the garage. It's a long way back. And a second picture that I took sort of shows from her driveway what it looks like. And essentially, the stone wall runs along here. It's a pretty steep cut down to her driveway. So it's not a space that is developed at all. It's essentially a little bit of wooded area, and it's unlikely to be changed. It's certainly true that no one would ever invest in developing her land right up to the property line. It would be, it'd be incredibly expensive and wouldn't do anything for her, really. So, it gives you a feeling visually of the effect on her property, which is pretty much nil. And for that reason, we've always maintained it up to the stone wall and used it up to the stone wall. We have our, we have a bucket, I think, for our trash. Now we know it's on her property. She doesn't care.
How far is the stone wall from the garage?
From the garage, well, it depends where
You can see it
you measure the
on
stone
this
wall.
map.
Yeah, on this map,
This is the stone wall.
the
This
line here is the stone wall.
Okay.
So
strange shape.
one side of the stone wall is this is 8 feet. One side of the stone wall is probably about 11 or 12 feet, and the other side of the stone wall is, probably
Well, it's sort of crumbled.
20 feet, maybe. It's a funny wall. It's not a very well-defined stone wall, so it's a bunch of rocks, and then there's a big drop-off, which is essentially all stone under there, I assume. So the stone wall is, at that point, very, very wide. Although it doesn't always look like a stone wall.
Yeah,
So again, depending on how you measure it, the stone wall is probably somewhere between, I would say, 14 or 15 feet up to about, probably 23 feet, maybe.
I'm just thinking of a strange idea, which is purchase that sliver of land from her and build the garage you want.
Well, we have talked about that, and it probably could be worked out, but the estimates I've gotten is it's not an inexpensive proposition. She has no survey, so in order to do the land transfer, she obviously would want us to cover all the costs, which would be lawyer costs, survey costs of, as I understand it, for a land transfer of your whole property, which is not small. So I haven't looked into the exact cost, but my suspicion is we're talking, $15,000 to $20,000 to do.
Well, it's just
exchange.
an idea in terms of if because you've compromised the garage you wanted. I'm just thinking that if you purchased that land, you could have the garage you want. It's certainly not a requirement for me, but I'm just making a sort of a thought experiment and saying, well, it's going to cost you, I don't know how much to build the garage. Is it worth it to have the garage you want and spend a little bit extra, or
You know,
Which is,
We don't
Yeah,
even have an
my-
estimate of how much it would cost to build a garage, so we're really talking about numbers we're not familiar with.
yeah, but my feeling
We
is,
hadn't gotten that far.
this garage is a minimal sized garage, but for us, we have small cars. This garage will work for us, you know. And in terms of, you know, resale, I can certainly imagine when that time comes, somebody may say, the garage isn't big enough for my pickup trucks and RVs and all that stuff, but it isn't honestly worth it to us at this point to worry about that aspect of it. So, we've talked about it, but for me, it's not, you know, the compromises we made are compromises which are acceptable to us. And I also tend to think of it, some people think of it in terms of percentage, but I actually try to avoid thinking of this development in terms of, oh, it's another $1,000, that's all this is, and 200, whatever it is. I don't know what it is, because we haven't got estimates, but, oh, that's only, you know, 1/4% or 0.5%. And then I think, okay, but that's, you know, $1,000 or $2,000 out of my pocket, which I could, you know, go on vacation or eat some nice meals or something, you know. So I try and think of it in terms of dollars, and $15,000 is, you know, that's a pretty nice vacation. You know?
no,
Plus you're
no,
getting-
but presumably it wouldn't be, it's not money wasted, because then it enhances the value of your property. So
Perhaps.
it's not as though it's a zero, you know,
Yeah,
it's not just one-sided is all I'm trying to get.
no, I agree with you, but,
Just a thought.
yeah, we're, at some level, we're pushing things a little bit with this whole, you know, concept. So, you know, financially, it doesn't appeal.
Plus you hopefully get the garage.
But I mean, if, you know, if it's refused, then obviously we have to think about what to do, you know, one way or the other, and that's, would be a possibility, or we might just forget about the garage. You know, I don't know what we do. I'm hopeful that we can get approval. I feel that we've tried to address the concerns about it pretty aggressively. That's what I had to say. Okay?
Terry, do you have anything else to add? I know you did in October, 2 months ago, I know.
Let's just review what we've learned. We've learned that as in many of these things, that our septic information, or location in relationship to the septic system is a controlling factor. We are also have learned that the well precludes, as well as geography, precludes this installation on the other side of the house. And that in the back, as we go back behind the house, we are very, on the other side of the septic, because you could drive over your septic, there's a steep slope. And it's not conducive to have a driveway that far downstream from the house. I think the pre-existing location of the house needs to be taken into your deliberations, because this is a house of some age, and this is the kind of places where they built houses close to the road. I have lobbied against, by the way, the removal of a portion of the overhang of the roof, because I think that these things get to be very strange things to build, and in a couple years from now, we'll all look at that and say, what were we thinking? Because of some difficult thing. But, you know, to your credit, I believe you've, in the spirit of things, you've limited the amount of the necessary variance request, even to the extent of making a funny roof on your garage.
It's pretty small, but it is a little funny.
So I think that you know, that, does this pass the test in our regulations and in state statute? Does this have to do with the land? You know, is the, and not particularly affecting other parcels in the same way? I believe that you can consider that, you can make that finding. I think that you know, you don't want to do any damage to the neighborhood, and I don't know that it does in terms of offending any senses. And we certainly, after some publication, haven't heard from any neighbor. In fact, don't we have a report favorable from your most immediate neighbor? You know, I've spent a little bit of time, because we've had some zoning problems on Acorn Hill recently. And I've spent some time driving past this, and I don't know that a casual observer will be able to notice if the garage is there or not, which kind of passes the test of you know, does it offend anybody's senses or not.
Would you like a motion?
I would.
I'll make
Well,
a-
before, can I ask, it appears that, and you have a better sense of this than I do, that if this garage is rotated a little bit,
Right,
then it obviates this whole thing with the cutoff, with the
Well-
setback. And having a driveway that's got a gentle turn at the end, it just seems like a, you know, a 20-degree rotation of this entire garage.
Well, there isn't room to do a turnaround of any sort, so that if you went into the garage frontwards, you couldn't just turn and kind of come out straight and be angled to turn and go out the driveway frontwards. You'd have to come into the driveway that way and you have to come back out again. And straight driveways are much less of a dilemma for taking your door handles off.
Yeah,
You
no,
drive through the
I'm-
narrow 18-foot door that we can squeeze in
Which I
there.
think we talked about 2 months ago, too.
Right.
yeah.
Yeah,
Our
we
architect,
talked
We
about
talked
that.
about
Yeah.
that.
Or challenging, putting it on a bit of an angle.
plus angling it, at least according, because it isn't really just, this shows one line, it's actually a circle that comes off of this. By his calculation, and that if we actually try and rotate it, it doesn't really help this corner. It doesn't help the position of it. That's, I can't make a very cogent argument for that because I didn't do the calculations myself.
Mhm.
But my architect, that's what he claimed, is
Mhm.
that it, really rotating it was not.
Well, right, you have to
Didn't move.
rotate it and move it a smidge. Right.
Yeah. And the land drops 2 directions there as well. So that not only does it drop to in this direction, but it drops in that direction. So this part of this garage is higher than the land
Yeah,
here.
no, right.
Yeah, this
And
corner's
So that way
about,
you'd have a garage that probably would be 8 feet off the ground, the floor level, finished floor level.
I think this is gonna be, how far, about 2.5 or 3 feet
Yeah,
off the
I
ground?
think so. I think
At this point,
Eventually it would
that
get higher and
corner.
higher,
Right.
maybe only 4 feet, but it would definitely get a little bit higher.
Yeah.
Right, yeah,
Pretty awkward, I
I
think.
wish I could make a clearer argument
No,
on the
no,
rotation, but I didn't ask him to.
Well, he's correct, that the
Address.
rotation alone, because if you pin that corner, the corner still, is still in the same spot.
Right,
I mean, so you've rotated some of it away, but you'd have to rotate and translate, you have to
Right.
Right.
move it.
So now I'll make a motion. If you have no more questions. Make a motion to approve the application.
I second it.
We can have further questions and discussion, if we feel. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
thank you,
Motion carries.
appreciate it.
Thank you for your
Thank you
very
for your
Merry
you.
Christmas.
deep deliberation. Gave us some things to think about, too.
Sometimes it's a challenge to balance literal interpretation of the zoning regulation with what works best for the specific
Exactly.
unique topography of someone's property.
Right, that's
Yeah, I don't,
why you have meetings every month.
you know, I feel it was certainly legitimate to ask us to be aggressive on
We appreciate
what to do.
Yes.
We really do.
Your time, our time.
Yeah, get back to the car.
And we can still get back to the Christmas festivities wherever they may be happening.
Oh, we do?
We got some business we have to do.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
very much.
appreciate it.
Okay, we have, right, you're right, okay, I'll do this one also.
Thank you, Terry. Thanks, Kristen.
Good. So the two same people are not here, Mark and, okay, good. The September 12th minutes to our regular meeting. Everybody have a chance to read them?
Sure, I think I left them. I pulled stuff out of this packet and I didn't fold it.
I sent mine to Lynn.
Yeah,
September.
I know, I got to tell my readers minutes, I'm like, where is Lynn?
Could we have her come back as a consultant?
I think the town can afford to.
September 12th. Well,
You want to make a motion to approve them?
I think we read them already, didn't we?
Okay,
I'll make a motion, we approve them.
thank you. We have a second?
I'll second.
Second. All those in favor? Thank you. And we have one more agenda item. You all should have your proposed dates
Yes.
for the coming year. Motion,
Make a motion to approve those dates.
thank you.
All second.
Second, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Anything else for us tonight? No? Good. Thank you very much. Meeting
Motion
is
to
adjourned.
adjourn?
Thank you.
I second it.
Did you get food, did you?
Yeah.